Hey guys, so in this video, I want to show you how to reduce your stress. So sometimes life could feel like it's a big wound up ball of string full of the stresses of life and full of the problems of life. And what you really want to do is that you really just want to unwind that string and just reduce that stress and find relief and find a sense of clarity. Well, this is what this video is all about. And I'm bringing tools that psychotherapists use, very simple tools that help clients be able to unwind this string. And it's pretty simple. It's just basically made of questions that you could ask yourself. So you could see that this woman has this like really big life problem in her head, and she's all stressed out because it's all wound up in there. But if you look closely at this big ball of string, you can see it's made up of 3 different colored string. And you can see that it's made up of black string, magenta string, and also blue string as well. And what this therapist is doing is helping bring clarity by separating these strings from this big wound up ball of string. So I'm going to show you how to do this here. So I believe that images are very powerful in order to help bring clarity to your mind and therefore bring a sense of relief. And you can see that in this image, this man is very calm and focused, kind of figuring out how to put this jigsaw puzzle together. And if you put a jigsaw puzzle together, you know that there's a certain method that is helpful. You can imagine that life is like a complete jigsaw puzzle. And when we're having a bad time, a number of the pieces fall out of the puzzle. So what you want to do is pick the pieces and put it back into the puzzle. And there's a way to do it. You could see that when it comes to a puzzle, you could identify the pieces by their color, their size, and also their shape. So by knowing these components, you could organize the pieces, and thereby later on, it's easier to piece the puzzle back together. So I'm going to show you how to do that. And when it comes to our mind is also made up of different components, just like color, size, and shape of the pieces. In this case, we have the triggers, we have the emotions, we have the thoughts, sensations, and our behaviors. And when you can kind of unwind these things, it helps bring clarity and thereby relief. So let's start with the first component here, and it's triggers. What is happening when you get stressed out? So maybe there's this general theme in your life that's causing you anxiety and stress. What you could do to identify the trigger in a much more clear fashion is to ask yourself, when was the last time this has happened to you? Like last time that you're feeling anxiety, can you bring me back to that time and tell me how that is like? And then when you get that sense of clarity, it's helpful, because then you can kind of break down the other pieces. Now, the reason why I want you to identify the last time you've been experiencing that stressor is that sometimes the stress in our life is this big, ominous issue that's constantly reoccurring in our life. And when we think about it that way, it's going to overwhelm us. So it's good to kind of focus on a specific example and just break it down from there. We could be very hard on ourselves for getting triggered by something. We might even be able to know what our problem is generally. And we think to ourselves, if I'm conscious of my issue, why do I keep repeating the same pattern over and over again? How frustrating is that? Well, the reason why that's the case is that the time that you're getting triggered, it's happening at a subconscious level. Before you know it, you get into a negative spiral, you're spinning with all these negative thoughts and emotions, and then you start to realize, oh wait, I'm in the middle of a negative spiral. So the idea here is, in order to reduce that sense of overwhelm about thinking about the problem, think about that specific event from the past where you got triggered. When you do that, it becomes easier to get more specific about how you may be bringing the past into that event, or the past into your general present time, and how that past affects you, right? The goal is to make the unconscious conscious. So the idea here is to identify your own trigger and think about a specific example from the past that has caused that trigger. So after you identify what your trigger is, what that event is, ask yourself, when that is happening, what are you feeling? So when you ask this question, oftentimes people answer in a format like this: I feel that he needs to cut his sugar. So once like a big sentence like that, that is not actually a feeling. That's actually a thought, something that's cognitive. A feeling is more something that is very visceral, something that comes physiologically from the body. And a good way to kind of think about it is that often feelings or emotions that are one word, like I feel happy, or I feel sad, I feel anxious, I feel afraid, I feel confused, I feel annoyed. And just to make it easier, I have a list of feelings down below in the description box. And when you're doing this exercise, when you think about something from a recent past that has been a stressor, take out this list and identify what those emotions are. And doing this activity in itself could bring you a sense of relief. So the other mistake that people do is that they might say something like, I feel good or I feel bad. These are very vague words. They don't really help pinpoint what you are actually feeling. So often I encourage people to identify their feelings first. Right after that event, that trigger, identify the feeling piece. That feeling is actually a really great signal to what is going on inside. There's a way that feelings get to that faster than thoughts can in themselves. But some people may be more thought-based people. They think they're more about their thoughts. And, if so long as you get to that feeling, that's fine. You could identify your thought and then identify your feeling. But I do encourage people to really pay attention to what their emotion is. So next thing is when you identify that specific emotion, say that it's anxiety, then you could tell yourself, well, it sounds like I'm experiencing anxiety. Or if you're fearful, it sounds scary. What I'm experiencing, it sounds scary. Just allow yourself to sit with that emotion. You don't have to necessarily use those phrases, but sit with that emotion. Often what people want to do, first thing is that they just want to attack that emotion. And what happens is that even though they're trying to make it go away, the emotion just becomes bigger, right? You're resisting it. The key thing is to identify the emotion, you empathize and validate the emotion by sitting with that emotion. Then what you want to do is to identify the thought. The next question you ask yourself is, well, when I'm feeling this, I am thinking, and you can identify what that thought is. So you can see earlier, we have an example of a thought. He needs to cut his sugar, right? I think that he needs to cut his sugar. That thought could bring a lot of frustration, for example. And it brings a lot of frustration because we're very much fused with that thought. So I want to bring you a helpful tip that helps you to be able to diffuse from that thought. What you could do is that you could add that phrase, my mind is telling me, before whatever that thought is. So you have that thought, he needs to cut his sugar. Then you could add like, my mind is telling me he needs to cut his sugar. Because that makes you realize that you are not your thoughts. You are the observer behind your thoughts. You're bringing your thought and you're diffusing from that thought and you're looking at it here. My mind is telling me this, right? And then look at that thought with curiosity and it might help to say, that is interesting. My mind is telling me he needs to cut sugar. And that helps you to diffuse from your thoughts. So think about an example. What thought shows up for you when you're having that emotion? Next, you want to identify what behaviors arise. So you ask yourself, when I'm thinking and feeling blank, I tend to, and you fill in the blank right there. And there's two main types of things that we tend to do behaviorally. First thing is acting out, and the other one is shutting down. So acting out includes things like yelling or arguing, getting aggressive, very overt behaviors. And then shutting down are things like procrastinating, withdrawing, and freezing. So it's good to just identify what behaviors tend to happen that may not be helpful for you, and to do so non-judgmentally. Observing yourself is a good point in starting to make changes. So when you can observe yourself non-judgmentally, then you're able to make the changes. If you judge yourself, it's hard to see things clearly. Like it's hard to see how everything's connected up in terms of the thoughts, feelings, sensations, and behaviors. So if you are in a state of non-judgment, you're observing from a distance and with compassion, it's easier to see the links and therefore start to make changes. And a good way to not judge ourselves is to tell ourselves we're each doing the best that we can, right? Given that what we consciously know. Okay, so before I finish here, I want to let you know that I have an article about unraveling life problems when they're like a big ball of string. And this will help really hammer in what you've learned here, but from a different angle. So be sure to check it out. I have a link to this article down below in the description box. And I also recently written an article, Feeling Connected When Feeling Alone. I also have it down below. Just to put everything together, ask yourself, when was the last time I experienced this trigger? So it could be that guy starts wolfing down all these sugary treats. And then what was I feeling? I was feeling frustrated. Remember, it's usually one word, right? I have a list of feelings down below in the description box. Then you want to validate that feeling. You want to sit with that feeling. I wrote the word thought there. I meant feeling. Then you ask yourself, when I was feeling, I am thinking. So when I'm feeling frustrated, I'm thinking he has to stop eating sugar. He should stop eating sugar. Then you say to yourself, my mind is telling me he should stop eating sugar, to bring that distance. Then you start to be curious about your thought. Then you say to yourself, when I'm feeling this way, where is it in my body? Where am I experiencing it in my body? And that is a good signal for you to become aware of, so that next time it happens, you know that you're going through a negative spiral. Then you say to yourself, when I think and feel this way and experience it this way in my body, I tend to what? How do you act out? How do you shut down? And it's good to ask yourself these questions just regularly throughout the day. So you create a habit of doing it. You could just like sit down and think about, when was the last time this has happened? That's good practice. So that when it actually comes to a time when you're going through a negative spiral, you actually could identify it and start to do this exercise. I'm sure that when you practice this, that it would help bring a sense of relief. And after you could observe the links between thoughts, feelings, sensations, and behaviors in this non-judgmental light, you'll be in the best place to start making changes. Thank you so much for watching. Click like and subscribe, and I hope you enjoyed this.